Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a great pleasure for me. I've spent about 30 years as a research scientist researching the fetus, the baby inside the mother's womb. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? Inside the womb, that is. But none of us can remember anything about it. Yet it's such an important time of our lives. So I was asking things like how the unborn baby detects changes in nutrition or oxygen coming from the mother. How did it respond in terms of where it sends its blood flow around its body and changes it might make to the organs that it's growing in response to those cues from the world outside via its mum. And it was becoming clear that this sort of adapting to the environment that the baby was doing while inside the womb was important, not just to how it was growing and thriving in pregnancy, but also was critical importance in how that baby, that individual, got on after birth. So let's see if I can get my next slide up. Yeah, so the idea really that our lifelong health into older age is determined behind the scenes in pregnancy, only visible in glimpses by parents, maybe on an ultrasound scan. And it seemed the way that the baby adapted in its early moments of life could determine how well it got on in response to the world around it when it was born for the rest of its life. This was a new way of understanding why some people may suffer from one or more problems with their physiology, often as they get older, while other people may not. And we're talking problems with the body like that can be classed as non-communicable diseases, and risk of those affect a large proportion of people worldwide. This was exciting. Well, I mean, it is exciting, but actually not really well known about. So most people still think about keeping healthy in terms of the controls they've put in place over their lifestyle, that they should just get a grip of themselves, shouldn't they? Eat a bit better, exercise a bit more, then they'll be okay. Or it was all about the genes that were dealt to them by their parents. And I and others in my field saw the need to unsettle these ideas a bit. And I was keen to get people thinking a bit differently about what makes them healthy. This, if you like, was the bee in my bonnet, in connecting them, engaging them with the science of development during their first 1,000 days of life, from conception to 2 years of age. Not as easy as it might seem, actually conceptually tricky. You've got science going on out of sight inside the womb, but you've also got that element of long-term consequence of that early life for health into older age. So quite a daunting thing to try and engage people with. And about 6 years ago, I think it was, I started taking part in sessions that were run by Life Lab in Southampton. This is a bespoke facility. They bus in loads of teenagers who come and do experiments and discover the science behind what makes them healthy. As a scientist, they put you in a room with a small bunch of 13 to 15-year-olds for a 15-minute Meet the Scientist session to help explain the science you do and give a flavour of what it's like to be a scientist. So STEM outreach fusing with engagement. And I did a training session with them which helped develop an elevator pitch, and that was very helpful. And those conversations with young people were quite intriguing. I saw them processing what I was saying about my science, and they asked questions that really got me thinking, often connected to their own lives, anecdotes. You know, my mum had morning sickness, or I was a twin, and sometimes it can be hard to deal with. There's a tendency to feel like you've got to comfort the individual, like that, in fact point out that it's a risk at a population level, and yeah, actually realizing that people should know about this because it's knowledge that they can perhaps make changes to improve their lot, and see that morass of diet and lifestyle information that we all get on a daily basis through a different lens. And I found that props helped. Can't actually change my slide here, that's annoying. Props helped, like offering them a grape, which just so happened to be the size of a 9-week-old fetus. And Life Lab, the team there did quite a lot to provide us with some feedback. So they did that in the form of post-it notes from the kids. And I think, as you'll probably see, that, you know, the one in particular at the bottom here, the grapes did go down well. You know, them being able to eat it as well, that helped. So that was a nice evaluation tool. And I found myself scratching my head, though. I go literally scratching my head to think how I could go large on this, if you like, find some device that, to start conversations at a science festival, specifically the Southampton Science and Engineering Festival, which is an annual one and attracts about 8,000 visitors in a day. Quite a terrifying prospect, I felt. And as I already said, I was struggling with sort of the conceptual issues relating to my science and doing this, but I chatted to colleagues and scribbled some stuff on the back of an envelope, and then in a rather kind of Wallace and Gromit-like fashion, disappeared into my garage at home and with a charity shop table and some garden cane spray paint and some chicken wire, and found that a giant sort of metaphor was brewing. And I came out sometime later with what I call the giant Kaplunk. It's a game about what makes you healthy, essentially. The balls in the Kaplunk game are the cells in your body, if you like. And we threw in a few stress toys on top as well, which are actual kind of organs, so we could talk to kids about that. And they pulled a kind of a health challenge card out of here, color-coded, and so we were chatting about bits of information, and that drew them to pull one of the coloured sticks out of the game. And the sticks were sort of yellow for nutrition, blue for exercise, green for genes, and the red ones were represented that time during pregnancy, your very early stages of development. So as the sticks were pulled, the balls start to drop, health is failing. And so I took this along to the Science and Engineering Festival, and I felt quite buoyed up by it, really. It was quite popular with the young kids, and of course they came with parents attached to them. So conversations were happening with two sets of public, and actually it wasn't quite as big and scary as I thought it might be. Some people are more reserved, of course, just like some of us scientists. And so we'd have other things on the side, models of wombs and fetuses and other mock-ups of, as you can see in the picture here, of scanning, ultrasound scanning in pregnancy, and even a pregnant tailor's dummy that they could stick body parts onto. Less noisy, less lively, but a bit of context for that giant visual metaphor that is Kaplunk. And obviously, you kind of, with all these types of activities, you're left wondering what kind of impact you're making. And one of the ways I tried to catch this was filming kids after they'd done the game. And this is Henry. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this when it plays. If it plays. Oh, that's not working. Oh, what a shame. Let's see if I get rid of, oh dear. Ah. That's okay, we may have to do with, oh no, here he is. Sorry. This is being a bit of a faff. I don't know why I can't highlight that. How frustrating. Anyway, the point is that Henry seemed to amazingly take away all the relevant messages about the balls dropping and the importance of pregnancy. I'm sorry I can't play that to you, but you know, I kind of was left thinking, wow, this had made some impact. I mean, obviously I don't think we're going to turn all of these kids into scientists by playing one game of Kaplunk, but it was interesting that they did take on board new ways of thinking about what makes them healthy. I mean, overall, I felt that the conversations I had with adults at the festival sort of largely fell into, I'm having real trouble changing my slides here. Hang on a second, right. Oh, there he is.
Try not to let the organs fall into the bucket and not let the balls fall into the bucket. They mean the different things, like the red means for your ball and all the different colours mean different things. You want to stay healthy before you are born, and so you get enough stuff in your body, so you don't get ill when you're an adult.
You get the gist. Thank you for bearing with me on that one. Generally, the conversations with the parents, I was struck that they followed a pattern. You know, first they were amazed, you were telling them some information they'd not heard before. Then we were trying to assimilate it into their own experiences, their own lived experiences, perhaps when they were pregnant or maybe a relative of theirs. And then quite quickly, people would want to get down to action. What could they do with this new information? But it really struck me doing all of this that you know, this two-way engagement opportunity really provided a space for that whole interchange to happen and that anecdote to happen. And, you know, this experience gave me pause to thought about the sort of language I was using and what it conjured up in people's minds. And it did affect what I did next, and gave me a bit of confidence to go a bit further by flinging open the doors of our institute to young people, to teenagers specifically, year 12s, who are a web of influence, are they not? You know, future leaders and scientists, and even future parents. They've got a big voice, and so I wanted to do something to connect with them. So we laid on a day, an open day at our institute, and where students could come in, these year 12s come in and hear a few sound bites of the science we do, but really get their hands dirty, so to speak, and hands-on lab experiments in the real labs of our institutes, and also get chatting to mentors, scientists, doctors in training about what they did, and help them to come up with questions they could put later at a later event. We worked really closely with our widening access team at the University of Southampton to make sure we were trying to give these opportunities to people, students who might need a little more encouragement. And in a survey, we did try to kind of get a feel as to how successful that had been. I mean, as far as it goes by postcode, for 14.5% were living in the lowest, most deprived parts of the local communities. We did do a survey of these students, and we did find that actually after their visit, they seemed more aware of us. You'd hope they would be, but they also seemed to be more able to explain some of these areas of science to their peers. So as far as understanding goes, it seemed to have worked. But in terms of what opinions they'd formed on the basis of that, well, it was going to be more complex to unravel. We really needed to hear the voices of these young people to get any further. And, you know, I've tried asking these students to come back and be reporters at the Science and Engineering Festival, but all coming back to one of these question time events that we laid on over a few years, and to hear their voice in the mix. One of these events, the first of these events, happened in 2017, and we called it Building Superhumans, and it was a panel of experts chaired by Professor Robert Winston, with students, these year 12s in the audience, really driving the questions. There was a panel of an Olympian, a president of a major society, Pediatric and Child Health. We also had a science broadcaster, and also sitting next to him, a chef. So it was a really lively event with lots of interesting questions from these students and driving the discussion from this glittering panel. I think the last question will pop up in a minute caused a sharp gasp, an intake of breath when it was asked. Not this one. Are genetic modifications okay? Perfectly healthy. Should we be aiming at perfectly healthy mothers and fathers or not? All sorts of questions. And here we are. Should anyone be able to become a parent? The audience gasped. In subsequent years, we ran one entitled Fake Food. That's Giles Yeo, who's one of the panelists. And then in 2019, which is the last one before COVID hit, it was Toxic. I did leave a message for Sir David Attenborough on a voicemail asking him whether he'd join the panel. Amazingly, he actually called me back while I was driving to IKEA with my daughter. It's a good story, and I actually nearly drove off the road with surprise. No, I'm afraid he couldn't make it. He was filming in Costa Rica. But actually, what was particularly nice about this event was that Shantae Jackson joined the panel. Shantae was a 16-year-old A-level student, but also Southampton's member of Youth Parliament. So a real kind of young voice speaking to young voices. So these events have been well received by the students who participated in them. You know, they found it really fun. And we did try and put some numbers to this, and we got some good quotes from students who'd taken on board some of the concepts of the science. And 90% of them seemed to think it altered the way they thought about what makes a person healthy. And the event was really good for us scientists, you know, shapes our ideas, helps the science. But crucially, it's provided a real important space for youth voice in science-related health. It's tiring, though, this public engagement, isn't it? And it can be undervalued. People seem to have to do it on the sly. It's maybe viewed sometimes as a distraction from core business. And, you know, but actually it underpins all sorts of connections we make. And it's so important. And, you know, while one activity might seem small, you know, a small group of people, few people connected with, small efforts do count, the little kind of the shards that make up that big rock that forms that impact. So part of my role now in Southampton is to, in the Faculty of Medicine, is working on schemes to help support my peers and to recognise people's development as an engager, and also recognise the publics that are getting involved in research, and provide some training as well behind the scenes. It's an exciting time for us in Southampton, you know, as we've got our Civic University partnership in place, and we're long listed for the City of Culture bid in 2025. So it's a good time for connecting with the communities around us. And for my own engagement, this is about a better health of the next generation, really, developing healthy lives. It's getting across the wonders and engaging people with the wonders of the first 1,000 days of life. Gives power to us all to improve health for all. And getting that right and getting it to the right people means a dialogue, engagement with real people. So I will keep plugging away with an engagement with whatever bells and whistles and sticks and bowls I can lay my hands on. Thank you very much for your attention.